Thanks for joining us. I'm Leanie Lambrink. The territories are all reacting to developments in a tariff war between Canada and the U.S. We'll bring you those stories in a moment. First, an update on the situation unfolding between both countries. Canada and the U.S. have agreed to pause tariffs against each other for at least 30 days. U.S. President Donald Trump said over the weekend he was imposing a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods and a 10% tariff on Canadian energy. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hit back with a list of $155 billion worth of American goods that were facing 25% tariffs. Now there's a pause. But as Olivia Stefanovich explains, the agreement wasn't reached right away.
For the first time since returning to the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau not once but twice today.
And we had a good talk in the morning.
But unlike his call with Mexico's president, who agreed to send 10,000 soldiers to the U.S.-Mexico border in exchange for a one-month tariff deferral, Trump didn't extend the same reprieve to his northern neighbor, at least not at first.
Look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state.
It took a second call between the two leaders for Trump to agree to pause tariffs for at least 30 days.
We are obviously pleased to see this development, but we have more work to do.
Specifically, Canada has agreed to do more with the U.S. to crack down on illegal migrants and fentanyl.
People are aware of this long-standing neighborly relationship. They know there's a win-win to be had. We're going to keep driving home that message as we implement these changes.
This is a sign that our efforts have been effective.
A relief for Canadian officials bracing for a painful trade war.
The fact that we, along with other provinces, were banning U.S. booze from the shelves, along with the counter tariffs by the federal government that we supported, I think got the attention of the United States of America.
But the threat of tariffs still looms.
For me, it's not a complete victory. For me, I still think that Mr. Trump wants to attack Canada.
Immediately deploy military troops, helicopters, and surveillance to the border.
The idea of militarizing the world's largest undefended border, supported by some as a way to de-escalate the situation.
We also need to do what we can to work alongside our largest trading partner.
Instead, Trudeau says nearly 10,000 frontline personnel will work on protecting the border. Canada will list the cartels as terrorists, appoint a fentanyl czar, and spend $200 million on a new intelligence directive to tackle the illegal drug and organized crime. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
In the Yukon, businesses started the day bracing for the impact of the tariffs. The territorial government had also announced measures as a counter response, but now all that is on hold. Virginia Ann has the details.
The federal government message over the weekend was clear. Canada is not going to back down in the face of increased tariffs, and neither will the Yukon. Premier Reince Pillay had announced that as of this week, the government was halting further orders on U.S. alcohol products and that current products will be removed from the 6 government liquor stores. Off-sales were also directly impacted by this decision since they have to place their orders through the Yukon Liquor Corporation. But why alcohol? One thing that's interesting is that Pillay said that this was a targeted approach. He said governments spent months studying political leaders and allies of President Donald Trump and what products are produced in their states, trying to understand how to impact them the most. And as a consequence, having them put pressure on the president. Shortly after the weekend announcement, we saw several posts from Yukoners taking over social media asking where and how to buy local products. Reactions were quick. People seem ready to switch what they buy. One business owner I spoke with earlier this morning said it would be impossible to survive without financial help from both governments. However, this 30-day pause has changed everything. So what does it look like for the Yukon? Cabinet officials have said that all the measures that have been announced are also on pause. This will give them time to reassess the situation and come up with a plan if needed. But what this could look like is still uncertain. Virginie Anne, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Now to the Northwest Territories, where some say the pause on American tariffs could be good luck for the mining industry. Sarah Kremlowski has more.
A pause to American tariffs on Canadian goods comes as good news for mining in Northwest Territories and for those in the U.S. who are interested in Canada's critical minerals. Metals like lithium and cobalt, which are used in batteries and other electronics. Fortune Minerals is one of the companies looking to advance critical mineral projects in Northwest Territories. The company is looking to build a cobalt, gold, and bismuth mine about 150 kilometers from Yellowknife, and they've gotten more than $6 million from the U.S. Department of Defense to do it. But they still need a lot more money to build the mine. The company CEO told CBC that even the threat of a trade war with the U.S. was scaring off investment in northern mines. And that's a lose-lose situation, especially when it comes to critical minerals like cobalt.
Now, we are in a position where we're going to provide metals for, particularly for the U.S., which means that that they're going to have a shorter supply chains, more reliable, and there'll be a decoupling from China, which I think is what the U.S. government is trying to accomplish. Some of these minerals just aren't available in the United States. And
CBC spoke to NWT Premier R.J. Simpson earlier today before the pause in tariffs was announced. He says there could be an opportunity for more Canadian investment in critical minerals if tariffs happened.
I hear it when I talk to the premiers and the prime minister. Everyone recognizes the importance of critical minerals in the north.
Karen Costello is the director of NWT and Nunavut Chamber of Mines. The organization represents mines in both territories. She also thinks there could be opportunities for NWT mines, even if tariffs are back on the table later.
It just means we have to be our own advocates. We have to get the message out about what we have in our backyard, what is available in the north, so that people and potential investors see that.
Costello says that's work both the territorial government and mining companies still need to do. Sarah Kremlowski, CBC News, Yellowknife.
In Nunavut earlier today, Premier PJ Achiagok said Nunavut will hold off on retaliatory action for now as well. Earlier today, he spoke against American threats, but said the tariff war also presents an opportunity for the territory to invest in itself.
There's so many opportunities in the north, from critical minerals that are in the ground. You look at fisheries that are in our waters that are abundant, whether it's Arctic char. So there's so much that we could do, but it requires investments to untap that huge potential we have.
Arctic Cooperatives had also been preparing its stores for the trade war. It was proposing signs to show customers which goods are Canadian.
While for the most part it's on the packaging, we certainly want to make it easier for people to identify without having to read that small print.
Canada may have bought some time, but fears over an impending trade war sent shockwaves across the markets today. Stocks dropped sharply on Wall Street, and the Canadian dollar slipped to an historic low. CBC's business reporter Kyle Bax has the story.
A rough ride on the markets, ebbing and flowing with every announcement and comment out of the White House. Initially, the TSX fell 2.5%, while the Canadian dollar plunged to a nearly 22-year low below 68 cents US. All of this following the announcement of U.S. tariffs against Canada and Mexico over the weekend. The markets recovered much of the losses, but remained down, spooked by how tariffs could not only impact Canada, but North America and the global economy.
What to make of it? The markets have no idea what to do. We saw, of course, the obvious losers. Any Canadian company that manufactures goods, physical goods to sell into the U.S. get destroyed.
It's a highly fluid situation, a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty, but I'd say so far the reaction in the Canadian dollar, although we've seen a fairly significant drop in the exchange rate, it could have been a lot worse.
U.S. stocks are also down over the concern that tariffs will hurt many households and drive up inflation. Overall, a tremendous amount of uncertainty with more volatility expected as the tariff threat remains. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
Donald Trump is also expanding the targets of his trade war to include the European Union. Trump has threatened to hit its 27 member countries with tariffs. He said he could impose taxes on EU goods imported into the U.S. very soon. Margaret Evans has more.
Ready or not, here he comes. That was U.S. President Donald Trump's message overnight, making it clear that the European Union should expect the same treatment on tariffs as Canada.
It will definitely happen with the European Union, I can tell you that, because they've really taken advantage of us.
The U.S. is the European Union's largest trading partner, the EU selling more goods to the U.S. than it imports. Trump calls it an atrocity. Arriving in Brussels for an informal summit Monday, European Union leaders were bristling.
I think that we have to do everything to avoid this totally unnecessary and stupid tariff wars or trade wars.
If we're attacked on trade topics, says the French President Emmanuel Macron, Europe has to make itself respected and react. Across town at NATO headquarters, Secretary General Mark Rutte was grilled on unity within the military alliance.
Our two members, Canada and US, are on the cusp of a trade war. Do you fear the alliance is unraveling at the most fragile of times?
I'm absolutely convinced we can deal with these issues, and there are always issues between allies.
Trump seemed to indicate that Britain, now outside the EU, might win a reprieve because he gets along with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Prime Minister Starmer's been very nice. We've had a couple of meetings. We've had numerous phone calls. We're getting along very well.
Starmer, who joined EU leaders in Brussels for what he hopes will be a post-Brexit reset for relations with the EU, says Britain can enjoy strong ties with both the US and the EU. One of the opposition leaders here, the Liberal Democrats' Ed Davey, has called on Starmer to convene a Commonwealth meeting to support Canada against what he described as a schoolyard bully. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Forced and coerced sterilization of Indigenous people is still happening. The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has supports available for Indigenous survivors. Join the National Registry and access up to $70,000 in healing support funds for individuals, families, and communities. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you or someone you know has experienced forced and coerced sterilization, please call 1-877-386-0750 or visit reproductivejusticesurvivors.ca for more information.
The Kanwipita National Inuit Health Survey team is going to every community in Nunavut, speaking to Inuit about their health and wellness. And every answer will help us as Inuit determine our own priorities for a healthier future. Together, we will answer the question, Kanwipita, how are we? Find out when we're coming to your community. Learn more at qnihs.ca.
I've never seen anything like this before.
The situation has changed very quickly.
In your once stolen vehicle in West Africa.
That is crazy.
Jumped in a car and then off they went.
I want my truck back.
300% increase in auto theft.
300%.
It's organized crime, well-financed.
They are selling vehicles that are insecure.
They're working on it.
We hear that from a lot of automakers.
Yeah.
We think we found your car.
Oh my goodness.
Cold weather caused water pipes to break underground across Rankin Inlet last week. The government of Nunavut and a local contractor were forced to dig up the frozen ground to find the breaks. CBC's Sama Eccles reports.
Margaret Okatsiak was in Winnipeg on medical leave when she heard about the water break
from her oldest daughter last week.
My panic was home alone. She was home. And when she woke up in the morning on Monday or Tuesday morning, there was water all over around our house.
Her youngest daughter, Becky Okatsek, was with her in Winnipeg. Becky says her greatest concern is not being able to use their vehicle, especially when her mother is recovering from a major surgery.
2 vehicles, one hasn't been working in like a month, and the other one we always use it in case my mom needs to go for emergencies or like to go get groceries and whatnot, but that is now stuck to the ground. And
CGS and the local contractor Arctic Heating had to dig up the frozen ground to find the brakes. Repairs are now complete, but the Okatseks still have no access to their vehicles. Their house is surrounded by ice, and they're afraid there will be damage to the foundation and flooring when the ice melts. And that's something they might have to pay for. Selma Eccles, CBC News, Rankin Inlet.
Ottawa is revamping how it reimburses provinces and territories for natural disasters like wildfires and floods. The federal government announced the shift last week. The CBC's Nadir Hashmi has more on what it means for the North.
Canada's Emergency Preparedness Minister announced a revised funding model to help provinces and territories rebuild after a disaster. The move is intended to modernize disaster relief funding from Ottawa in response to climate change.
Just look down south of what took place in near Los Angeles, where the cost of the damage is $250 billion. So it's staggering, and why this resilience work and modernization of the DFA is so important.
Climate-related disasters in the Northwest Territories aren't new. From unprecedented flooding in Hay River that caused around $175 million in damages to a devastating fire season that destroyed much of Enterprise in 2023. These disasters left the territorial government with significant bills to pay.
We are pleased that there is some good news here from the federal government.
The program will fully cover eligible mitigation costs in high-risk areas. Bose says this incentive will provide more flexibility in budgeting. Money can now go in building better infrastructure to reduce the impact of future natural disasters.
Being confident that there is additional funds that can be put towards mitigation and that territorial government wouldn't have to bear the entire cost of that, that's a big deal.
Bose explains with an example when a house or structure is being rebuilt after a natural disaster.
But is there something that can be done in the recovery process that will help lessen a future impact? Is there a type of roof that might help?
He says that whatever the solution, whether new materials or technology, the key difference now is that funding is available to implement these measures. An expert says there might be challenges too. The reforms are designed to increase accountability in how disaster relief money is spent.
What the federal government doesn't want to do anymore is just give this money back away to provinces and territories without some accountability to try and rebuild back in a way that helps manage risk.
An improvement, he says, is speeding up the flow of funds to provinces or territories.
Oftentimes, the provinces don't get the funding back for this thing, for 3 or 4, sometimes 5 years after the event.
But how effective will these changes be? Thistlethwaite says that'll only become clear after the next major disaster. The updated funding program takes effect on April 1st. Nadir Hashmi, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The NWT government's new Indigenous employment policy might see some changes. It was introduced because Indigenous employment in the public service is at a record low in the territory. The policy is supposed to be implemented in about 2 months, but as the CBC's Jocelyn Chappelle tells us, there's still uncertainty about the best way forward.
The Indigenous employment policy is set to come into effect April 1st. Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak says there are discussions being revisited about it. One of those is Indigenous Northerners being prioritized first in the hiring process. Originally, the new policy would apply to all Indigenous Canadians and do away with all other priority groups.
The majority are saying to me that that's going to satisfy their concerns, and we're willing to go forward and hopefully see a more representative workforce as a result of that.
Wozniak says she hoped to discuss the changes with MLAs last week, but the meeting was turned down. Robert Hawkins, MLA for Yellowknife Centre, told CBC News last week he did not want to attend it.
There was a request for a meeting yesterday, but it's been my experience that when the government has said no, not once, not twice, and more than 3 times, then ran out with a policy and saying this is what we're doing, the meeting is just an education to MLAs.
Wozniak says she's been in contact with MLAs over the weekend, as well as Indigenous leaders that are in favor of the policy change.
No definition is going to make everyone happy, but we go back always to, what's our real focus and what's our goal.
There is currently an invite for public feedback on the IEP from the Government Operations Committee. That will be open until February 15th. Jocelyn Chappelle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
An Ontario father says he's struggling to keep his teenage son away from drug dealers on Snapchat. Ithil Musa with our Go Public team looks at why some say the popular social media platform is ripe for drug trafficking.
It's an app known for its fun filters, but one Ontario parent warns Snapchat is also where illicit drugs are sold.
I'm trying to keep my son safe while these drug dealers are manipulating him, because they're reaching out.
We're not identifying Roger to protect his son's identity. He says his 15-year-old has been buying drugs on Snapchat, but tracking that has been difficult for one main reason.
Messages on Snapchat are deleted once they're viewed by the recipient. It's a unique feature of the app that makes it nearly impossible, say some parents, to monitor illegal activity.
Getting access to drugs on Snapchat isn't just a problem here in Canada. In the U.S., relatives of more than 60 young people who've overdosed on drugs allegedly purchased on the app have filed a lawsuit that claims Snapchat's role in illicit drug sales to teens was the foreseeable result of the designs, structures, and policies Snap chose to implement to increase its revenues.
I think that Snapchat's executives belong in prison.
Sam Chapman is one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. His 16-year-old son, Sammy, died in 2021 after overdosing on a pill he purchased on Snapchat. Chapman says his son didn't know it was fentanyl.
The dose that killed him was delivered to our front yard like a pizza after we were asleep, and we found Sammy dead on the floor.
Family Center. Snapchat says their parental control features allow parents to see who their child is talking to on the app and to report any concerns. The company also says it uses artificial intelligence to shut down the accounts of drug dealers. But this youth activist says it's not enough.
All of your messages and the photos you send, the stories you post, disappear after 24 hours. It creates this black box of social media where you don't have any record of what you sent.
And that has Roger in constant fear that his 15-year-old son will overdose.
I cried driving past a cemetery because I started thinking about, okay, if my son dies, how are we going to do this?
Roger says his focus now is keeping his son safe, and with Snapchat, it continues to be a challenge. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
The Yukon Quest is well underway. Quest veteran and former winner Michelle Phillips is in the lead, but this race is much different than in previous years. It follows a new path through new communities. Cheryl Kawaja is following the event from Ross River.
It's still called the Yukon Quest, but it's essentially a new race.
It's exciting, it's different, going to be fun anyway.
2 hours south of Whitehorse, Teslin is the new start. 10 teams will do the longer run, about 700 kilometers, half of what the race once was. But locals are delighted all the same.
And the weather, wow, just except for the cold. It was minus 39 here this morning, so.
From Teslin along the lake to Johnson's Crossing, where the teams turn up the Canal Road on day one en route to Ross River. The trail was planned to go from Ross River to Faro, but that section was canceled last minute.
It is a brand new race, and it's a learning curve.
That section was not tested by a dog team, until just a few days ago. The trail has steep hills, and it was deemed too dangerous for dogs and mushers.
It was a little bit of oversight, yeah. mistakes happen, and we hate it that it happened so late, but it was something in the best interest of the teams.
The Yukon Quest used to bill itself as the toughest sled dog race in the world. Maybe no longer the right slogan, according to some. At a former checkpoint, the Braeburn Lodge on the North Klondike Highway, it's very quiet this year.
It used to be a tough race. Not now.
We miss them dearly, and we wish them all good luck. And enjoy that easy street trail they got going on this year.
But in Ross River, even if the race is very different, there's still excitement, and many new volunteers are stepping up. Dog teams on the shorter version of the race will end here between Monday and Tuesday morning. Race officials are scrambling to get a new section of the trail ready for the long-distance racers. They'll now head over this river up the North Canal before turning back for Teslin. Cheryl Kawaja, CBC News, Ross River.
That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/north. Thanks for watching. I'm Leanie Lambrink. Have a good night.
The question is,
I want to ask you about
why is this such a big deal? What does the science say?
what was their reaction?
What are we talking about here?
Who told you?
So, to be clear,
What would you say to them?
what is the actual story there?
Big question is what's going to happen tomorrow?
Let's talk about some serious topics now.
What should you do?
What happened?
What are you going through? Tell us about that moment. What she means by that. How would they have known that?
What we're hearing from people is
I think we can explain.
How can any of this be fair?
Now you might think, hey, we just need more doctors, but that's not really it.
Russian scam here. Shows you where it starts, where it ends.
Were you really willing to risk that job? Yes.
at Thunder Bay's favorite festival, Wake the Giant.
Ta-da! There it is.
Stream anytime. CBC News.
This is CBC North on your smart TV because CBC News is now streaming local. Local news and weather on your connected TV or favorite device. CBC News North, streaming now.
We invite you to play What My Line.
Welcome, Mrs. Baker. Those folks over there need to guess your extraordinary occupation.
Are you an entertainer, Mrs. Baker?
Yes. Do people come to watch you, perform? Yes.
Do you travel for work?
Yes, I do.
Do you ever wear a special type of costume?
Yes. Is your job, physical? Yes, indeed. Are you a member of a team? Yes.
Are you a professional baseball player?
Yes, I am.
Created during the Second World War, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League included 68 Canadians. One of its brightest stars was my mother, Saskatchewan's Mary Bonnie Baker, a pioneer for women in sports.